Naughton, and I have the honor to host the upcoming 30 minutes where we will focus on innovations and complications. Where does the inspiration come from? How is it translated into a watch's design and functionality? And how is all that reflected in the wonderful timepieces from a.lange Söhne? And for this conversation, I have the honor to welcome the Director of Product Development of a.lange Söhne, Anthony de Haas, here live in the studio.
Hello, hi Carl. Hi dear friends.
And connected to us via video call, I welcome SJX from Singapore and Gisbert Brunner connected to us from Germany. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
It really is a great honor and pleasure to have you here with us.
Everybody.
Hello. Great, to Singapore.
Yeah, and a big smile from Singapore as well. So we're talking about innovations and complications, and to dive right into the topic, I mean, a.lange Söhne pushes the boundaries and challenges what is possible time after time. But why?
Very easy. I could respond to this question as being a watchmaker. This is our daily job. But that sounds a little bit strange and maybe a bit arrogant, I don't know. I think Lange and Söhne, one thing is the hero, and it has been since 1990, since late Mr. Blumlein and Walter Lange refounded the company. The product is the hero, and we have a quite narrow or strict boundaries of what Lange is and what it can, but it has everything to do with watchmaking. We are watchmakers, not watch assemblers. We are watchmakers, and that hasn't been changed over the 30 years. And we will continue to do that. And yeah, sometimes we try to surprise the people, the watch fans, with some unexpected complications, implications, and sometimes maybe people see it as a bit more complicated or more commercial thing, but because even Lange and Söhne need to earn their money to pay the salaries at the end of the month.
So that's how it is. Mr. Brunner, obviously you're well known in the watch world, so to speak, not only at Watches and Wonders. You're the co-founder of Uhrenkosmos. You wrote more than 30 books. Quite a few of them are actually in my library as well, so it's great to have you here on the show. And obviously you know a thing or two about innovation and complication. Which complication, just in general, fascinates you the most, would you say?
Yeah, I have to go back because I'm following a.lange Söhne since 1994, when at October 25th has been the first press conference, and I've been there. I've seen the Lange 1, I've seen the Tourbillon pour le Mérite, and I've been fascinating what you can do starting from the scratch, because you have to know Lange and Söhne has been dead for 50 years, and then it came back really with fantastic novelties and innovation as well. If we focus at the Lange 1, which has been traditional, but on the other side, it has been a real innovation regarding the design of the dial and the complications like the big date and the two barrels and the power reserve indication. I've been fascinating from the first moment, and much more I've been fascinating from the Lange Tourbillon pour le Mérite, and I have been lucky to buy one immediately when I've seen it. And this, in my opinion, has been innovation in a technical way, but linked to the past with the Fusee, which has been a real great idea, combined with the tourbillon, which never has been made in the history of watches. So I think this is really fantastic what the team with Günther Blümlein and Walter Lange, which I knew very well during the time, did within a relative short time.
Now, since you just mentioned it, the outsized date and the way the asymmetrical dial was put together, do you remember the first time that you seen that? And was that radical for you, or was it something we said, well, it's about time that something like this happens?
This has been quite radical, in my opinion, and it has been really fantastic. I spoke to Günther Blümlein at that time, and we made an interview in 1994, October 25th. And he told me about the ideas, and he said, if you want to be successful in this world, where a lot of high-end watchmaking companies are around, we have to do something different. And the Lange one has been really different in the world of watchmaking. And one point has been the asymmetrical design of the dial, which has been copied after that a lot of time. And on the other side, you have the big date, which has been copied. The big date hasn't been new because companies like Girard-Perregaux had big dates in the 1930s, but Lange and Söhne did it in a very different and very functional way. And in my opinion, this has been totally innovative, the way to construct a big date. If I compare, and I made an article recently about the development of big date, it has been totally different to everything which has been done during the last decades in terms of big date.
That was something really important, I think, that Mr. Brunner said there. It's been copied a lot. So going back to that moment where you said we're going to go for the big date, the asymmetrical dial, a lot of companies, I would think, as a part outsider, would field test it. They would show it to people outside of the company, outside the manufacturer, and say, what do you think? But the way that you express it in the beginning, it sounds more like you think about it, and then you say, that's what we want to do. And let's find out later on how people react to this innovation.
If you're talking about the Lange one, I think Mr. Blümlein was such a great visionary. And we should not forget that he had a huge experience by first saving in the 80s the IWC company and later on the Jägerle Coulter. So he was a very experienced man. And I think also he had a perfect mix between being an engineer and a marketing man. Apart from his enormous charisma, personally, but he knew, and of course he shared, probably it was way before my time. I'm only 17 years in that Lange now, but it was before my time. And I remember being a young watchmaker, still working in Holland, when I saw Lange Söhne and the Lange one first, I didn't like it because it was such a strange bird. But I had to get used to it. Right. But like people say, that's happening most of the time with some fantastic designs. It takes some time to get into you, and then it never leaves you. Right. But Blümlein, yeah, they had genius ideas. It's from a blank paper. The only thing they had was the history, a rich history of making beautiful pocket watches. And they took the right elements. So in the movement, the classical elements like the gold chatons and the hand-engraved balance cocks, the commitment to use German silver, not only in the complication, because that's very common still today in complications, but with to say the commitment, we do this in our all program. So from underneath to that most expensive piece, we're going to use this. That is technically a big challenge for a manufacturer to handle this material. Of course, we're getting used to it after 30 years, 26 years. Okay, but in the beginning, that's a huge commitment, because you make it your life very difficult. But that was not a point, to differentiate. And I think Blümlein knew as no one else that Swiss-made sells automatically, and the Germans, especially the strange bird from the former Eastern Germany, where they drove Trabants and stand in line for bananas in the grocery shop, that was the truth. Making luxury watches. And I have heard that some people from the business said to Blümlein when he showed his ideas, "Are you sure, Mr. Blümlein? Eastern Germany? Luxury? They don't know." But they had, and at that time and today still, but they already had at that time excellent craftsmen. So they gathered, and then the whole experience, the adventure started, because in the beginning it was a big adventure. Right. Because they didn't know if it would work out, but
it did. It worked out. Yeah, the strange bird worked out. Let's take that strange bird all the way to Asia. Because obviously there's a big appreciation for the timepieces from a.lange and Söhne over in Asia. So SJX, what are people looking for? I mean, you advise companies and individuals on collecting, obviously, so you'd know. I mean, when people in Asia look at an a.lange or Söhne timepiece, do they look at the dial? Do they look at the aesthetics? Or are they really into the complications and the innovations that hide under the dial?
It's definitely the technical qualities of the watch first and foremost. So you have the complications as well as the finishing of the movement. So watches like the chronographs they make, the datograph, double split, triple split. I think these are really icons of the brand, and they're popular with collectors here. And of course, you have the side work, which is truly unique in watchmaking. I've been doing some research into high-end digital watches recently, and the side work is truly special. Even though it's been around for a long time now, and other brands have tried to do digital mechanical wristwatches, the side work probably, when you consider the construction, the finishing, the reliability, and the design, I think it's still the best, even though it's been around for now, what, 11, 12 years?
So which of these complications that you mentioned, which one is your favorite? Or do you have a favorite?
I would say there are two contenders. It's difficult to choose. It's either the side work, which is here, or one of the chronographs, the double split, triple split, datograph. It's difficult to choose between the two because they are both good at what they do, but they represent different sort of approaches to watchmaking. The side work, I think, is thoroughly a modern 21st century complication, while the chronographs are more obviously inspired by vintage movements, classical watchmaking in the bridges, the levers, and the layout of the movement. Yeah, it's almost impossible to choose between the two.
Okay, very good choice. I mean, you're spoiled for choice there if you have to choose between those two. Now, Mr. Brunner, we've just seen the images from the double split and the triple split, and I think it was 14 years, if I recall correctly, Mr. De Haas, that lay between those two models. So was it a surprise for you, Mr. Brunner, when the triple split came, or did you think, oh, it's about time that they evolve this one further? Why don't anyone do it?
Let me please go back a little into the year 1999. I remember very well at the Basel World, and we had a personal meeting with Günther Blümlein, who showed first time the flyback chrono of a.lange and Söhne. And I'm very fascinated by chronographs, and I have a big collection of chronographs. And when I've seen the movement first time of the L951.1 flyback chronograph in the datograph, I've been totally fascinating how you can do a chronograph in a different way. Because if you look at a lot of chronograph movements, traditional ones with manual winding movements, they are looking more or less similar. And if you have a look at the movement of the datograph, it has been different. And I think this movement has been the platform for doing fantastic things like the double and the triple split later on. And I think it took 5 years to develop the double split from the datograph on. And this is very important with a.lange and Söhne, doing tradition in a different way. And the datograph has been representative of doing things in a different way, which are traditional but different. And the double split has been fascinating because it has been the first time in the history of wristwatches having a split hands for the seconds and for the minutes. And the triple split has the same thing as well for the hours. And this is unique in the world of watchmaking. And that's what makes Lange and Söhne desirable, and that makes Lange and Söhne different from other brands, in my opinion.
Okay, so a big differentiator there. Just thinking logically, you would say, I guess, from a watchmaker's point of view, saying, if we can do that, why can't we do that? So focusing on the two that Mr. Brunner just mentioned, the double and the triple split, the 14 years, I mean, it's not like you started in year one and then it took another 13.
No.
But why does it come so natural to you to say, that's the next thing that we have to do?
I think that's the way how we think.
Okay.
And in a sense, it's quite logic. But it's the same as we do SIHH or watch fairs. What do we do the whole day? We talk about what we do. We talk about watchmaking. We do not talk about planes or I don't know what else. And I think the focus, and also in the company, in the team, is like that. This is our way of thinking. And of course, you know, a little bit back to history. Mr. Blumlein and Walter Lange, they said, we have to give 200% to get a certain achievement, especially in the beginning. Today we're quite established and we continue what these great gentlemen build up. And it's quite an honor to further carefully develop the brand. Logical thinking, yeah, to be honest, double split, we had success. We had so many other priorities, Zeitwerk, Lange 31, we made so many watches, and we are still a relatively small team, although compared to the number of people in the manufactory, like 580 people in glass in the factory, 55, so 10%, let's say, is product development. So it's compared to that, it's huge, but it's still 55 people, and we had so many priorities. So to be honest, we thought about doing a triple split, but we didn't. It took 14 years because we had so many other stuff in between. And in the same time, in these 40 years, I sometimes wondered why no one else, let's call it, jumped on that train to make something like that, not a triple split, but maybe an interpretation of a double split or a further development, because it's so logic. Split time measurements, not only within one minute, but more minutes, but even more. Right. And that is, I think that is clear. It was a kind of a surprise, to be honest. Nothing happened. And of course, the last months before that 2017 SIHH, we were like, uh-oh, I hope now nothing happens. You know, it suddenly comes, oh, another brand comes with a kind of a triple split. Oh, no, you have a development. But that, okay, we would have found another solution for that, but it didn't happen.
Right.
And it still didn't happen, because we should not forget, the watch relaunch this week is the second generation of the triple split already. It's still, but it's okay, it's good. And that's also fascinating to the whole watch industry. There are many beautiful companies, colleagues. I'm not a sales guy, they are not competitors. I know many friends in the industry, friends, colleagues. That's so fascinating about the watch industry. Everybody does its own thing in all kind of different styles.
Right.
That is fantastic, and it's fun.
Yeah, and the way that you just recounted this moment, like, please help us God, nobody else had this idea when we present this. That brings me to one thing, and I'd love to compare the Western and the Asian view on that, and that is there do we have trends? Like sometimes we have a couple of movies with the same topic, and everybody's surprised that they come out at the same time. Even books in the literary genre, there are several books that hit on the same topic. They appear at the same time. Is there something like trends in complications and innovations, or the interest in specific trends? Let's start in Asia, SJX. Do you make out any trends when it comes to complications and people loving them?
I think there were trends in the past with complications when watch collecting was a fairly new thing, say, 20, 25 years ago. For a period, the tourbillon was the most popular complication of all. At every price point, you would find tourbillons and even iterations of the tourbillon. But I think today, because the market is much more mature in terms of collecting and complications and development, trends there are not so pronounced. There is nothing but the tourbillon was when it was fashionable. This year, instead, the trends appear to be very simple. It's just different colors. Green is obviously a trend. But the current trends, I don't think apply to Lange, because Lange has never really been a trendy company. So I don't expect to see a Lange with a green dial and a rainbow bezel, unless Tony has something up his sleeve.
I check with his sleeve. No.
No, there are no funny colors in my sleeve. Don't worry, no worry. And I know, to jump in just quickly, SJX, colors, I know also this year we are also quite colorful, and it is something like, let's celebrate that the grey, cloudy COVID blanket which has covered the world last year in a dark grey mood, it has influenced all of us. You feel it now. We are all desperately impatient to wait for the vaccination to get things going again. So we are about to get that grey, dark COVID blanket out of our minds and celebrate. And don't worry, SJX, green. I love nature.
Rainbow.
I love nature, but maybe not so much on a watch dial. We let others do that, and they make some of them beautiful, but you're exactly right, not trend following, you know.
Well, you're a trendsetter, Mr. Brunner said with the Lange 1. A lot of watch brands followed it, or a lot of designs, let's say, followed it. So, Mr. Brunner, from your point of view, from almost like a historic point of view that you've been following the watch trade and the evolution of watches and complications. Did you see any specific trends, or let's not call them trends, but things that are more appealing to collectors or enthusiasts at the moment that haven't been so in the last 10 years, maybe?
Regarding complications, okay, we have trends. When I look back when I started collecting, long time ago, we had the trend of chronographs. Then in the 1980s, the trend of the moon phase came. Then in 1986, Audemars Piguet has started with the tourbillon, and all the brands have followed with their tourbillon constructions. And one day the tourbillon got banalized. At Hong Kong, you can buy a tourbillon for $500 now, and it shows what's happening. And therefore, in my opinion, it's much more interesting to focus complications which cannot be banalized. And in this case, Lange Söhne is ahead of a lot of other brands with the chronographs, the turbograph, for example, or the double split or the triple split, and the minute repeater. Don't forget, today, a couple of brands have new minute repeaters, and a couple of brands have new perpetual calendars, which the perpetual calendar, in my opinion, is a very helpful complication, and compared to the tourbillon, and as well compared with the chronograph. Nobody in the world needs a chronograph today, but it's fascinating by mechanics. So I think the trend will go to have helpful complications as annual calendars, as perpetual calendars, and having precision timekeeping with sophisticated automatic or manual winding movements and manufactured movements out of own manufacture.
Right. Thank you very much for that assessment. Now, you said something quite provocative, I guess, that nobody needs a chronograph anymore. And I guess nobody needs a watch with a jumping hour. If you have a dial with, other indications. But still, the Zeitwerk came, and SJX, if I'm not mistaken, you're wearing one today? Yeah, and then
yes.
And then this is something that really interests me. I mean, when people talk about innovation, they always say, oh, this is so innovative and it's never been seen before. So there are two kinds of innovation: the incremental ones, where you just make things better and better and better, and because you learn from your experience. And then there are these things that are so far untapped or unheard of or just not tried before. Now, when you take the Zeitwerk, and then now you have a Zeitwerk with a date, and it's got slimmer or thinner rather. Would you say that this is just incremental, or is this what hides underneath in order to achieve this complication is actually rather a revolutionary innovation?
The Zeitwerk is of course a very nice example, because when we started Zeitwerk in 2004 developing, it was a big adventure.
Right.
It was a dream to make something which is in the famous Semper Opera above the stage, and it's a 5-minute clock, So you start thinking, wouldn't it be great to have a digital watch? There was a kind of a digital watch, you know, IWC made shitloads of them with the Paul Weber system in 1900 something, and they had the small numeral things. Even in the big pocket watches, they had small numeral windows. And later we found out why these windows were so small, even in a big pocket watch, because we said, our dream, 2 windows next to each other, because if you look at your alarm clock, it's digital is reading from left to right, not from up to down most of the time. So big windows, yeah, great. So your wish list, your dream list is big. So that's the easy part.
Okay.
And then you start working around. And we were working on the Lange 31, and we had to solve that problem with the long power reserve by a constant force remontoire system. Where comes the remontoire system from? From our main clock in our main building, the Stamhaus. It has a remontoire system. It's a huge clock, but it has a remontoire system. And that inspired one of the movement designers to go in that direction to find a solution. Like we did the Lange 31, there it jumps every 10 seconds. What happens if we could create a jump every minute? Because you say, yeah, not a 5-minute clock, of course, on your wrist. No, every minute. And if it jumps instantaneously when the second hand comes at 12, of course, a wish list is easier. and then we started to work around, and it was a very bizarre project, I can remember, because from amount of indications, it doesn't show more than, for example, an 1815 up and down.
Right.
Hour, minutes, seconds, and a power reserve.
Right.
Of course, it has, Tijdweg has a constant force, but as the project continued, the costs of making, because due to complex solutions to make these huge discs jump, oh my God, I have a watch. And it's always, we're already at 69,000 euros with price, public price, and this has never been done. That's a risk. But it's also us who are willing to take this risk. We dare to take this risk. And to be honest, we were completely overwhelmed by the reactions and the feedback when we launched this watch in May 2009. It was very polarizing. That's good. Like we had that again 1.5 years ago with the Odysseus, polarizing negative things. It shows, my perspective is, it shows there's a lot of passion involved in the things we do. We do matter because there is polarizing.
Right.
And that's great.
Right.
Because you should not forget that we learn awful lot also from negative feedback. Not only the positive, I can't, it's nice, it's sweet, it's honey, but sometimes you need the salty stuff to stay alive also. So that is a perfect balance. So we were completely overwhelmed. And we didn't plan Tijdweg as becoming other versions with date and things. Not at all. In May, we launched the watch. We got that feedback, and it gave a vibe to ourselves.
Right.
I was wearing a prototype. Unfortunately, something I have to do the bad and the difficult things to wear prototypes. Now I'm very honored, but I was wearing one, for example, and when it's slightly dawn darkness, it's hard to read.
Right.
Because the numbers are quite lower, and we had the idea, if we could do something with luminous hands, but then on the Tijdweg, it would practice again. It sounds logic, because we occupy ourselves with what we do.
Right.
That's it. It's a work. No, but it's a job. And that was the idea, to create something like Lumen.
Right.
With the glass dial and lighting, it would be great if.
Yeah.
And then the results or the effect and the feedback on the Lumen, not only because night light,
right,
but also on the hybrid modernity in a total classical watch was perfect, and which inspired us. And the next step was the striking time. Striking time, these Casio LCD watches you had in the 80s?
Yeah.
You know what they did? They do every hour, beep. We worked parallel on the grand complication, and we just made our first gongs for that grand complication, and it gave sound, and we were happy. It was completely new ground. Striking watch is another Glashütte theme.
Right.
Never has been. Where I came from the Swiss, there it was more my baby acoustically. And so we used the project for the Grand Complication to gather that know-how, because I think it's extremely important that a brand like Lange Söhne has that know-how or get us. It's also my responsibility to get the rail track ready for the next 50, 100 years for the people to continue with the Lange Söhne, because that's the idea, long term.
Right.
So coming back, the Casio watch with just the beep, digital watch, Zeitwerk, beep, no, of course, no beep, but we have gongs now. We know how to make them. Would it be great if we just different, not a classical minute repeater in a Zeitwerk, and things develop like that?
Right.
And if you would have asked me 10 years ago, is it possible? And I had that question very often. Yeah, 36 hours in a Zeitwerk is not so much. Okay, but it is like that. Now we have the Zeitwerk date with 72 hours. Can you feel how proud I am on the movement designer team we have in Glazute?
Right.
Because they say, hey Tony, we have look, we have been thinking. Again, we have been thinking, because it's all very down to earth what we do.
Right.
And that's fun. That's the reason why I'm working in this magnificent company, because it is like that. It's a great team.
It doesn't sound like innovation, it sounds like problem solving, and you just happen to have really great solutions that look amazing. And because it's amazing to speak with you and to listen to the stories from SJX and from Mr. Brunner, and of course from you, time flies, which is, you know,
that's our job.
Permit the platitude. But we're already at the end of our 30 minutes. In the beginning, yeah, when we designed the programs, I thought 30 minutes, that's ample time, and it's never been. But I don't want to leave you, gentlemen, without asking you one thing, because you just mentioned wish list. And if there would be a mix of complications that you would put on Tony's wish list.
Okay, I embrace myself.
what would that be, Mr. Brunner? Is there anything that you'd say, a.lange Söhne has to do this and that complication? I would really love to see that done in the German way.
You see how he's smiling.
No, when Wilhelm showed me, the Odysseus first time, top secret, and I had to sign an NDA, and I said to Wilhelm, what I would wish would be a time zone device in the ordinary movement of the L155.1, because I want to have buy Odysseus, and I would be happy to have, as I'm traveling a lot, to have a time zone device with jumping hours hand, very simple, very easy to handle, and this would be a companion to wear every day, and this for me would be the perfect exit watch.
Oh, an exit watch.
Carl, can I ask you something? Is this recorded, so I don't need to write it down?
It's even streamed on YouTube. I guess a lot of people will react to Mr. Brunner's wish list. So let's turn over to Singapore, SJX. What would you dictate into his little black book?
A Zeitwerk with digital seconds. This is very simple, I'm sure.
It is. And Tony and Anthony de Haas is thinking about it.
Wish lists are always simple, you know. Like I thought, let's just write it down and look at it and dream about it, and then.
Right.
Okay.
So we gave him something to do, and I do have something to do. I have to thank you very much for staying here with us in the 30 minutes. Everyone who's been watching it, obviously at Watches and Wonders 2021 on the YouTube channel. It was a great pleasure having you with us here remotely in the studio. Thank you very much, Mr. Brunner and SJX. And of course, thank you to you for telling these stories and sharing your passion so that it really becomes a connoisseur conversation.
Thank you very much. It was a huge pleasure as always. And I really miss you guys. SJX, Gisbert, it would have been so fun to see each other again live. Let's look forward to this and see you as quick as possible.
Exactly. The live times will come back. Thanks a lot and have a great day.